Hello and welcome to UmiCast, a podcast about business and entrepreneurship that will help you do more and go further. Today my guest is Steve Erdal, the Chief Scientific Officer of Wordnerds. Welcome to UmiCast, Steve. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Nina. It's lovely to be here.
Excellent. So do you want to kick us off? I mean, you're obviously working in real cutting edge kind of hot topics at the moment in terms of AI and customer experience. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Wordnerds and your role in that and kind of how you got there from being a freelance copywriter?
Yeah, it's not the most obvious kind of path, is it? No. It's not the most obvious journey. So Wordnerds is a customer feedback tool using AI and some parts of linguistics to essentially make sense of huge quantities of customer feedback. So if you're a big organization, customer-focused organization, you're getting millions upon millions of customer feedback pieces of data into your business through social media, through email, complaints, survey responses, all kinds of different things like that. How do you go about making sense of all that data so that you can make the best possible decisions and ultimately make your customers' lives better? And that's what Wordnerds does. It takes all that text data and allows you to understand what your customers are feeling, how it's changing over time, what the specific things are that you can do in order to make that better.
And what do you do while you're there?
So it's changed a lot, as often it does with kind of founders of companies like this. You start out doing everything, and then gradually you sort of take hat after hat off to your team as the team grows. So I started out very focused on the linguistic side of things. So in answer to your question about how I ended up in this kind of area, I was working at Newcastle University. They had this thing where you can get a kind of staff discount on master's degrees. So I did one because I was particularly interested in Scottish mythology. Again, I know, obvious path from Scottish mythology straight to tech company. But I was really interested in Scottish mythology, and I was interested in how it differed and how it was similar to Irish mythology. So I did this course looking at how you could compare the two, and that's how I got interested in Corpus Linguistics. That's basically, taking one set or corpus of data, comparing it with another, trying to understand the similarities and differences in that textual fingerprint. And I was looking at Irish mythology, Scottish mythology, seeing how they were different. Around that time, I got sick of working at the uni, and I was, which is a wonderful place to work, and I met lots of wonderful people there, but I just had my kids, and I was kind of feeling like I couldn't work in a big organization where obviously there's lots of pressure on you, and it's also really hard to get anything over the line. So I wanted to just work for myself so that if I could spend more time with my kids, and if I had a bad day, it just affected me, kind of thing. And so I was thinking about what I could possibly do. Not a lot of job ads for Scottish mythologists that you get in the northeast of England. And it was Ruth, my wife, who said, well, that thing you're doing of what's interesting about this data in comparison to this data, could you do something like that in business communications or in Marcoms or something like that? And because it was the world I knew, I started looking at university prospectuses. So I got all the prospectuses that year, put them through the same process I was putting the Book of Lear and the Fenian cycle through, and then went to the unis and was like, is this anything? Is this interesting at all? Could you? And so I ended up just sort of writing kind of reports for unis based on their output to students, their kind of marketing copy, looking at how that compared to their competitors. I did that for a bit, didn't really know what to do after that, but I was kind of at the point with it where I could hire a little space in a sort of shared office kind of thing. Not nearly as nice as the amazing Umi office that we're in today, which is absolutely wonderful. But it was a little kind of desk in a sort of shared office, and one of the people I worked with there, a woman called Jess, who was a social media freelancer, said, oh, you should talk to my husband's boss, who runs a digital agency. And that's how I met Pete and Angela, who are my two co-founders at Wordnerds. They looked at what I was doing with this kind of stuff. They said, could we automate this to turn it into something that can look at customer feedback? And then that's what we spent the kind of next few years doing. So at first I was kind of helping build the platform. Now, as we have a bigger, broader team, we have heads of product and heads of engineering and so on. I'm more focused now on the kind of the next steps, the sort of future of the platform, looking at new use cases, looking at potential sort of innovation projects and that sort of thing to try and figure out what else we could do with this thing that we built.
That sounds amazing. So you've gained quite a big client recently, haven't you? Is it not the Highways Agency?
Oh, sorry, National Highways.
National Highways,
this
is it?
has been a really exciting project, and I think.
Tell us more about that one.
Yeah, so their challenges again, they've got lots of data from all sorts of different customers across all, like anybody that uses the National Highways roads is essentially a customer in their perspective, and I think they're really they're going through this really interesting change from being a simple kind of infrastructure organization that just cares about the roads to being a customer focused organization. And obviously there are slightly different things that you need to understand with those two different hats on. Like if you're an infrastructure, you just need to know that your customers are safe. If you're a customer service organization, you need to know that your customers feel safe, and that's a slightly different thing. So we're helping them to get a bigger understanding of their customers by trying to unite together different ways that people might make the same point. I think this is where where language is so wonderful and fascinating, but also difficult when you're trying to do this kind of thing. So if, thinking about, for example, delays on a road, if you and I are stuck in the same traffic jam, you might say, oh, it's bumper to bumper out there. I might say, we're crammed in like sardines. Like bumpers and sardines have nothing to do with each other semantically. Like there's no sort of connection there. But as humans, we can read those two sentences and say, well, they mean basically the same thing. So if I'm trying to figure out whether traffic jams are getting better or worse, I need them in the same pot so I can measure them, track them over time, see how they're different in different areas. So what we're trying to do is to bring together customer feedback based not on the specific language that a particular customer might use, but based on essentially what that customer meant. And that's the kind of work that we're doing with National Highways, is trying to take all the kind of different aspects of that, of the customer journey experience, and pull together those challenges regardless of the specific idiolect to that customer. And that then allows them to make better decisions about improving customer feedback and ultimately customer lives.
So yeah, you get, obviously sarcasm in particular is something that I guess AI probably struggles with quite a lot. How have you been getting around that? Sarcasm
is a really interesting one, because like we've had two human engineers reading a tweet and arguing over whether or not it's sarcastic. There's so many different aspects of sarcasm, and one of the reasons that we love sarcasm and use it a lot is that it could be misinterpreted. So that's really hard for an AI to deal with. We're really good at your kind of your sort of standard structures of sarcasm. So like, oh, thank you so much, Network Rail, for making my train late. I love standing on the platform by myself for 2 hours. That's, what sarcasm basically is this juxtaposition between what the person means and what they're saying. And where it's like that, you can see it very clearly. There are always going to be somewhere that juxtaposition is a sort of layer back, and you're just saying the positive thing and the negative thing isn't necessarily in there. AI is not great at that, and I quite like that. I quite like the fact that there's still areas where, the relationship between two humans isn't quite comprehensible. But generally, where we're talking about customer feedback, when a customer is talking to their an organization that's given them a service or a product, it's generally that first kind that they'll use. It's generally that one where that it's right on the surface, that connection between this is what I think, this is what I'm saying kind of thing. And so that sort of stuff is, you can use the underlying structure of the language and see, okay, these ideas are being pushed together in a way you wouldn't expect. And that's how we kind of go about picking out the sarcastic stuff in that sort of area. But yeah, it's a constant battle, and one that I don't think we'll ever fully win, because, as I say, humans don't always know whether another human's being sarcastic or not. So what chance does a computer have?
Yeah. Okay. So then, obviously, so you had that idea of Ruth. Thanks very much, Ruth, for bringing.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Shout out to Ruth. Well done,
amazing. So obviously, Ruth had this idea. You obviously then went and met your co-founders and started on this. How have you gone about kind of doing an MVP and really sort of testing this? And at what point did you know that you really had something that was investable and that you could take forward from that early work of prospectuses through to where you are today?
Yeah, so the first time I met Pete, I sort of showed him what I was doing with the unis, and he was like, "This is interesting." Showed it to a couple of his clients. He was running a sort of digital agency, so your standard kind of websites, e-commerce, and kind of marketing strategy stuff. He said, "This is interesting." Showed it to a couple of their clients. They were like, "This is interesting, but we don't have the budget right now," or whatever, and it didn't really lead anywhere. And then, like, random Wednesday, kind of 5:00, I was leaving the office for the day, that was shared office that I was sharing with Jess. And Jess got a phone call, and she was like, "It's for you." And it was Pete. And Pete had just been at the first day of a 2-day hackathon at Nissan, who obviously up here in the Northeast have a big factory in Sunderland. And they'd organised this hackathon because they were having a problem. The problem they were having was, it's quite similar to the National Highways one. The problem they were having was they were trying to find people who were having problems with new Nissan cars. So if you buy a new Nissan, you're driving it home and there's a problem, you'll take it back to your dealer. The dealer will fix the problem, will write out a form, will put it into the Nissan system, and that whole process takes about 2 weeks. And when you are making a car every 30 seconds, that's a lot of potential warranty claims going out the door. But what you might also do in that situation is you might go on Twitter or wherever and have a little bit of a rant about your broken car. Oh, classic, yeah, absolutely. So what their challenge is how do you find the 2 or 3 tweets a day that are about a problem with a new Nissan car in amongst the 3,000 or 4,000 tweets per hour about Nissan or one of its brands. So people buying and selling cars and news stories about Nissan, and some idiot in a Nissan just cut me off at the lights. How do you get rid of all that so that you can just see these, so that those 3 tweets come to the top and you can see them? Keywords, don't do that because there's any number of reasons you might use those keywords. Sentiment analysis won't do that because there's any number of reasons why somebody might be upset or annoyed. So what we did, so Pete's kind of hypothesis, which is why he rang me up, was, is there something in the structure of the language that we can pick out to say these are things that will make it more likely to be that tweet that they were interested in? Now, Pete had been at this this hackathon day with and there were massive teams. They got people from all over the world. There were huge teams of data scientists. Pete and Dakin and Story, the agency, they were the smallest organization there by a long way. He figured anything in the data they're going to find. So I need to think of a different way of doing it. And so he thought, who do I know that might have a different approach in this? So he thought, well, I'll call this linguist guy. I put together a few syntactic rules based on that structure of the language thing. We went back the next day and pitched Nissan together. They liked it. They gave us a little bit of seed money to do a first sort of prototype, and that's kind of how Wordnerds started. So we were kind of, it was the Nissan problem that kind of we I think when Pete saw what I was doing, he was like, there's potential here somewhere of automating this stuff. But that was the sort of catalyst that went, okay, this is something that we can actually go and take and actually bring to market, which is really exciting.
And so was AI involved in that at that point?
Sort of. AI, as we think of it now, with the sort of large language models and the kind of the ChatGPT stuff that you think of, that didn't really exist then. So this is like end of 2015. So there was AI. We were using AI bits and bobs to what's called parsing the data. So essentially figuring out what job each word's doing in the sentence and all that kind of thing. How the words are connected to one another. We were using AI that was doing one of the things that really separates us as a platform, I think, because there are other people that are doing similar things to us, is the fact that we use things other than AI as well, and the best idea wins. I think the old adage of if all you've got's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think a lot of the time with these kind of AI problems, well, we'll just get a bigger data set, we'll do a bigger neural network, we'll do it, and it's all about that rather than thinking about, well, what other options are there? And because of where we started, we've been able to incorporate these things and start to and have a kind of a different ways of approaching that problem, which has been useful. But at the start, yeah, it was more corpus linguistics, and the AI was supplementing, I suppose, the corpus linguistics. Now it's kind of the other way around. The AI is pushing a lot of this forward, and the corpus linguistics is kind of supplementing it as we go.
So you've still got a human element into the platform and somebody actually drilling down and looking at what they want to know. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that'll always be there. I think it's not having a human in the loop is a real danger. I think a lot of the real horror stories you hear about AI, the kind of, the Wonka factory thing, I don't know if you heard about that, for example. Oh, just this, it was in Glasgow, I think. There was like a Wonka experience kind of, this it sounded like amazing, and they did lots of pictures of it on AI, and then people turned up and it was a couple of bits of cardboard stuck to a wall kind of thing, and they'd done this whole script they got some actors in and done a whole script for them to do, but that was also all just written by AI and not checked, and so the actors were being asked to like produce magical bubbles from nowhere kind of thing, and had nothing to give it, but because there'd been no sort of connection between, well, okay, this is what the AI says, this is what we're going to do, and a lot of, to a greater or lesser extent, that's always a big challenge. And I think I think where AI is really brilliant is the when you have massive amounts of busy work, like for example, reading through every single post that every one of or every single piece of feedback that your customers give you. That is huge amounts of really, really difficult and frustrating and often tedious work to get a human being to do all that. Understanding that data set and then figuring out, well, these are the things that we need to do based on that. AI can give you a set of examples, but then an actual human to go, okay, it's given us these 5 things. Number 3 is the one we really need to nail. I think that will always be a part of this process. And I think humans working with AI is always going to be preferable to human beings just naturally trusting it, because it will never have that level of understanding of all the factors around what's going on there. So yes, I think that's.
Oh, yeah, there was a book I read, When Digital Becomes Human, by Stephen Van Bellingham, and it was really, really good. It was talking about how humour, empathy, and something else. I can't remember what it was, but there was just basically that AI is never going to be able to completely beat humans at their own game, because you just can't quite get some of those things. So that's Absolutely. Cool.
And I also don't think I don't know why you would want that. Like, I think the analogy I always give is, I think what's going on with AI now is what went on with automation in the previous. So automation was replacing, was robots doing things that human beings used to do with their bodies. AI is automating things that human beings used to do with their brains. And if you go to the Nissan factory, they have these things like, they've got a massive mechanical arm that's just moving, this whole thing is just moving this really heavy piece of equipment from one place to another. It's just doing that all day. And it's like, it's an incredible piece of engineering, just this enormous, and it's shaped like an arm, and it's moving back and forth. What you don't have is robots in the factory carrying boxes around trying to pass themselves off as human. Like, and I think that to me is what AI should be trying to do. It shouldn't be trying to replicate every aspect of a human. It should be picking out individual things, in this case, lifting things with our arms, trying to maximize that thing as much as it possibly can, and coming up with the best way of doing that. So from our for our platform, that's, reading through all the different data sets and trying to put them into categories. That's something that you could get a human being to do, but an AI can do it better, faster, and quicker. But it's not trying to be a whole human being. That's I don't think where the value lies. It's in taking bits of what we do and maximizing them. And I think that's what AI will end up being.
Sounds fab. So you mentioned that you got some seed funding from Nissan. What's your finance journey been since then?
Yeah, so we got a little bit of seed funding from Nissan. They were amazing. They said, as long as you don't sell it to any other automotive organizations, we don't want any of the IP, which was really generous of them. We started to get a few more customers, and we got to a point where so one of the developers at Dakin & Story, the agency, came and worked with me, and we sort of worked together on the prototype. Pete was doing the majority of the selling. I was helping a little bit out there. So it's kind of the three of us working on it. We were sort of in a little corner of the Dakin & Story office, and we got enough customers to start to think that, okay, this is something that we might be able to do something with. And so we went to an agency. We went to a funder. We went to an investment agency, and we asked, we were looking for, about $250,000 to, get another dev on this, to get a sort of dedicated salesperson, that sort of thing. And we went to North Star, who are our current investor, and they said, well, this is great, but, you're not committing to it. This is something that, Pete's still running a digital agency as well as doing this. And so why would we then invest if you're not really going for this? And then Pete did something amazing and difficult and I guess life-changing for all of us, which was he went back to North Star, and he said, if I wind up the agency now, will you give us more money so we can make a real go of this? And they said yes, and they got some angel investors on board as well. And we went from 250,000 to 650,000 was the eventual size of our seed round. And that was a really sad and difficult time, because obviously we weren't able to bring everybody from the agency with us. And again, Pete and Angela were amazing on that front. They made sure that nobody missed a day's pay. Everybody who left to another job. They made sure that all of the commitments of the agency were completely dealt with before people would move away from them. But what it meant at the end of that process was that we were able to take, I think, 9-ish of the best people in the agency and move them directly across to Wordnerds. So we went from sort of 3 to 12 people kind of overnight, and that kind of, if you think about 3 to 12 in a growing organization, that's normally a really difficult place to get to, because some people won't work out, some people won't get along with each other and that sort of thing. And we were kind of just gift wrapped this team of people who had already worked together, already knew each other, already liked each other, and we already knew were good. So that was our kind of the first big sort of step. We went from about 15,000 MRR in our first, when we got that money in, to 50 in a year. We were kind of got this sort of growth thing going. We were like, this is easy, this kind of, this whole startup lark, this is so easy. We were kind of thinking we were geniuses. And then, and this was around May 2020. So you can imagine what's about to happen. We kind of a lot of our customers and stuff at that point were in things like rail and things like where you had lots of customers out in the real world, and all of a sudden we were of no use to them at all because they didn't have passengers, they didn't have customers. So we had to pivot really fast. We had a couple of years of really slow growth. Still sort of, the arrow was still going up, but it was going up very, very narrowly. And that was a really kind of challenging time. We were kind of, we were, it wasn't a good time for us to raise for obvious reasons because to get more money in. So we were kind of just eking out where we're going. And we've kind of, I think, just sort of come out of that period. It's taken a long time for the course to write, but we've kind of done quite a lot of pivoting now. We're into retail organizations. We work a lot with housing associations as well. And we've able to pull out the customer stuff. And we're now just at the point where we are looking to open another round of fundraising to really take what we've got and start to really supercharge it and go into that sort of growth phase.
Right. And so what lessons did you learn from your initial seed round that you're going to take forward into this new round?
That's a great question. I think, I don't know, the key thing that I think has made a big difference to us is always remembering the end goal. People invest in you because, they want to get a return on the investment at some point. And that means ultimately that you're looking to exit the business. And that is something to be aware of. That's your goal if you decide to go down this path. And because of that, the business has to work without you, has to work without the founding team. And I think from that perspective, I think the most important thing I would say is to write everything down from the ensuring that your code base is understandable all the way through to, what's a good joke that breaks the ice at the start of sales meetings. Like every kind of different, anything that you can codify, you should try and codify, because at that point, that's one of the things that they're definitely kind of looking for, I think, for investment. They're looking for how are you going to get from where you are now to a point where we're going to recoup our money because this business doesn't need you anymore, which is, I think, a real kind of, for founders, it's a really kind of tricky thing to get your head around because, you want to be pivotal to your business. You want to be, but that is one of the things that will hamper your growth. And being able to say, here's a playbook that shows everything I've done in order to sell the product, make the product, market the product, deal with customers. That's the kind of stuff that will allow you to grow really fast because you are able to get a smart person in, train them up to do this thing, and then they will be able to do it as well as you can is the idea.
So the idea being that you would sell your company and then they recoup the money.
That's where mostly they'll get their money back.
And that's quite common for tech companies, isn't it? That they're looking to be sold eventually to a bigger fish, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, there's two sort of main kinds of sale that you might get there. There's trade sale, which is, selling to a competitor or to someone who's in your space who wants to get your customers and your technology. And then there's the kind of private equity sale where you're selling to somebody that wants to kind of make money off the back of what you're doing. With tech companies, it's generally the first one that's the more common. Generally, it'll be one person in the market decides, Airbnb, for example, this is how they started. They just bought up everybody else that was doing something similar. And so so there might be one kind of the kind of group of competitors in your market that goes, right, we're going to go for this, and they'll get in funding to buy everybody else kind of thing. That's the most common kind of way. So that's where we're likely to go, I guess.
So how many staff are you at now? You mentioned that you quadrupled your staff pretty quickly. And how have you gone about then, developing the culture, developing your own roles? You mentioned that your roles changed quite a lot from being a founder, taking off some hats. How has that been developing, and how do you keep your culture on track? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I think that firstly, I think the process you go through for hiring, I think, is really important. Understanding what your values are. they will attract the kind of people that will allow you to maintain and embed and improve your culture. One example that always stuck with me is one of our values is 7 skill startups. So, if you're working in a big organization and you come in and give 7 out of 10 every day, that's absolutely fine and great. Startups don't work like that because there's so few of you. And the reason that 7 skill startups became this phrase is because if you have someone giving 9 out of 10 every day, it's really easy. You pay them more, you make sure that they're happy, and you let them grow. If you give someone giving 2 or 3 out of 10 a day, that's also really easy. You have to part ways with them. That's not working out. Someone giving 7 is a really, really difficult situation because that's pretty good. But it's not going to get you to where you want to be. And I think what was really interesting to me was we've hired 2 members of our leadership team recently. They have both come in and made such an incredible difference to our work. We have Nat Grant, who is our head of customer service, and Scott McMullen, who's our new head of marketing. Both of them mentioned that specific thing when we had our values. So I thought that was really interesting. I really liked that. And so it became this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy almost. The fact that it was there meant it was attracting people that was like, I want to be an 8 or 9 every day. That's what I want to give to where I work. And so it's about being very clear with your values and with what you're looking to do, and then the people that you bring in will naturally kind of embed your culture, and we'll do that. It is definitely hard though, because it is the culture used to just be me and Pete and Ange and Hugh, the dev that we work with, and it's now spread and shared across loads of people, and often they have different ideas of what to do. But I think for me, the most important thing is your hiring policy. That's the thing that's going to get in the people that will help you to maintain the culture.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously Ruth earlier in the conversation. You work together now, don't you, as well? How has that been with managing your work-life balance, given that you're both, you're both working in that business and your parents and what have you, and obviously through the pandemic and everything? How has that worked?
Alice also, she'll want me to say, my daughter Alice wrote a blog for us during the pandemic because I was in charge, obviously, of homeschooling. We found out very quickly she knows more than me about most subjects, so I taught her to use the platform, and she wrote a blog on the platform. So she's also technically a Wordnerds worker. We do use that blog quite a lot. When someone says, I think AI is a bit complicated, we can show them this blog of, well, here's an 8-year-old using it and doing fine. So, but yeah, Ruth and I working together, I've had definitely people come to me and say, I don't know how you can work with your partner. I could never work with my partner, kind of thing. Ruth's so lovely. It's the first thing that's really important. It was so nice during COVID to have a bit of that office environment, like to be able to be working together on that front. In terms of the kind of the work-life balance thing, I think it's really fair, and it's something we do have to work on. And sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's like when you are aware of the specific thing that the person's working on and the specific stakes involved, that's often much better than I've got to work late tonight. I think being able to say this is the thing that I'm working on can actually be really, really useful in that regard. And yeah, I think we have sort of defined roles and things where one of us takes the lead and the other one takes the lead. I think that's really important. But I love it. I think she's my favorite person, and so having her a part of every part of my life is something that I really, really like having.
Yeah, that sounds really special. I'm sure she'd love to hear that as well. Get some brownie points there, Steve.
Absolutely, thank you. If you just cut this bit out and I can send it to you.
Absolutely, we'll do that. So in terms of this new round that you're doing now financially, what's that going to do to propel you in the future? What are your plans for the next sort of 5 to 10 years? Have you got that far ahead really in startup world?
Yeah, well, so I think there's a few things there. There's some technical things that I think are really interesting. I think there's definitely a thing where large organizations if you work in a large organization, you don't really want to be on another platform. You're already on 5 or 6 platforms. And so one platform that's just dealing with your customer feedback. So I think a lot of what we're going to be doing now is easy data in, easy data out from the platform. So making it easy to, to get this data all categorized and enriched and then passed back to your BI tool or whatever. I think that's going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing. I think to an extent it's about new verticals, trying to figure out and understand where else we can fit in. And then, the big one is international. I think all but one of our customers at the moment are based in the UK. Their headquarters are in the UK. And I think that's something that we want to change. We want to start to pull in more organizations from further afield, because I think that's the way that we're going to get the growth that we want to get in order to get to the next sort of level. So
you've got an international customer already?
We do, yeah. We work with Yahoo in the States. Which is, that was a really interesting one. They were our quickest turnaround of customer ever. They just went, right, we like this, let's do this, which was lovely to see after, a lot of the time, and I think again, this is quite common for startups, particularly data-led startups. The amount of time it takes you to go through the sales cycle is really, really long, because there are normally more checks and balances that they'll do on you, and rightly so, right? Everyone wants to make sure that their data's kind of secure and that sort of thing, but yeah, they were like, really, right, let's do this, let's go, which was really great. So we want more of that. I think that's definitely where we're going.
National expansion, taking over the world with Wordnerds.
I think that's pretty much where we're going with it. Yeah,
sounds great. So if somebody wants to hear more about Wordnerds and the journey that you're on, where do they go? Yeah,
so wordnerds.ai is our website. We are also quite active on LinkedIn, especially. So do follow our head of marketing, Scott McMullen, who does a lot of really interesting articles on customer feedback and the best way of getting value out of it and that kind of thing.
That's great. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Steve. It's been really interesting.
It's been lovely. Thank you for having me, Nina. Thank you.
So that's been a fascinating conversation with Steve. And if you'd like to learn more about any of the topics that you've heard today and get some advice for your business, you can go to umisatnav.co.uk, where you can also find more of our podcasts.